All I'd like to say is my husband and I, my great-grandfather baptized Tom Lea, so I grew up in a community, third generation El Pasoan, where he has contributed so much, plus touched many parts of the world. But I can't tell you how pleased my husband and I are in founding this fellowship. We didn't do it to honor Tom Lea. We did it so people would know him and know his work and learn from his work and go on journeys with his work all over the world through his art as well as his literature. So I was just telling Selfa, I've been so pleased with the fellows now, because that's exactly what's happening with people going to China and talking about China and our Chinese immigration here in El Paso, and looking at his paintings and as a journey for your music. It's just beautiful, and I thank you very much for what you're doing, and my husband and I are very, very pleased, so thank you.
So thank you, Holly, and thank you, Adair, for that introduction, that beautiful introduction. And it is my distinct pleasure to be here. I'm Dr. Dominic Dousa, as they had mentioned, and here I'm to present the project that was the fruit of this Tom Lea Fellowship for the 2022 to 2023 year. So I think Holly stole my thunder a little bit, but I always want to begin by thanking those who have made this possible, because when we get to a point like this, just to think about kind of who all made it happen, it's not just myself for sure, not just kind of the people who are closest to me, but it's many, many folks who provided their unwavering support along the way. So special thanks to all those at the Tom Lea Institute, the UTEP College of Liberal Arts, and in specific, so Adair Margot, who just spoke to you a moment ago, the founder of the Tom Lea Institute, Holly Cobb, who gave that, again, very warm introduction, who has been always there to respond to me for my questions and my requests, and again, a true supporter all along the way. To Dr. Ben Como, who's again kindly joined us here this evening amidst a very, very busy schedule. Dr. Selfa Chu Martinez, who has been kind of the point of contact for this fellowship from the beginning, and again, provided all the support that I needed to get this project up and running. And then to Dr. Steve Wilson, the chair of the Department of Music. He's on the road today, so is unable to be with us, but he is the one that kind of provided the spark of getting our faculty to look into the Tom Lea Fellowship and to apply for it. I also want to thank my friends and colleagues, Dr. Stephen Nordstrom on the violin and Michael Way on cello. And even though he's listed as Mr. Michael Way, he is on his way now to his doctorate. He is earning his DMA degree at the Texas Tech University, and he will have that title shortly. So I'm really happy that they're joining me for this presentation. So a little bit about the background on kind of how this came to be. So it mentioned Dr. Wilson, how he kind of brought to our attention the Tom Lea Fellowship. And last fall came out the call for proposals for the fellowship. And as I got it in my email, I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to it. It's another one of those kind of College of Liberal Arts emails that you see, and then you say, okay, maybe this doesn't really apply to me. So I kind of put it in the background. But then Steve came to us and said, look into this, folks. There's a lot of opportunities here. And specifically, he actually went to Dr. Nayeli Dousa, my lovely wife, and told her that there might be an opportunity to tie Tom Lea's work into a music appreciation class, one that has a lot of impact, a lot of visibility at the university. And so he encouraged her to look into that. And then when she came to me to get my opinion on that, the thought occurred to me, music, art, what a great combination, especially for someone like myself whose specialty is composition. It seemed like a natural fit. It seemed like kind of a marriage that's not forced. And hence I looked into it, and I went ahead then with the proposal, and then it's kind of run since that moment. Now, they say luck is where preparation meets opportunity. That's the saying. And kind of another impetus for this was an inquiry that I received from the Galan Trio, which is a chamber music ensemble from Greece. And I got this email out of the blue in the summer saying, we are interested in doing a collaborative project with you as part of a concert series with Texas composers. And like that initial Tom Lea email, I kind of put it off to the side. I thought, this might be a little bit too much work to get the support, to put this all together. How am I going to work with people from 600 miles away to make this work? And so I kind of put that in kind of the back of my mind. But when this fellowship was due, they came calling one more time, and they said, would you be interested? We're just following up on this. And I looked into it a little bit more in detail, and they indeed had done their research. I listened to their recordings, and their music, the music that they performed tended to be very much in line with the style of music that I like to write. So I investigated a little bit further, and I thought to myself, hey, here's this Tom Lea Fellowship opportunity. Here's a chance to write some music for a chamber ensemble. Let's put this all together. And they had a project in Greece. In Greek, it's called kinesis. They talk about motion and everything, but I thought about another word, again, that has Greek roots that I kind of really think captures the spirit of this. It's synergy. It's all this energy coming together. We got Tom Lea. We've got this group from Greece, and we've looked for a way to make it work together, and then that is kind of what was yielded this project. So the proposal involved then a composition of a new work with Tom Lea's artwork serving as the inspiration. And then, again, to get the Galan Trio involved there, to use the funds that will be part of this fellowship to help bring them over here and to provide an honorarium and accommodations, and then to have them present this as well as take part in a presentation to students. So that was part of the residency, as well as, again, then subsequently for having them to record this work in addition to the works they had from the other Texas composers on a project that they had planned when they returned to Greece. So a little bit about the timeline, just to go through this quickly. So in November of last year, this proposal that I had submitted was accepted. And there was a quick turnaround on that because I had to get the music out to the Galan Trio. So in the next half month or so, I went ahead and did some background research, and I selected the artwork that would serve as the basis for this new composition. Across the Christmas break was the time that I used to write this new piece, and so there was a quick turnaround time, and by the grace of God, I was able to complete this and get it out to the Galan Trio again in mid-January. 2 months later, they came for their residency and their concert, and that was a little bit of a white-knuckle ride in that their plane got delayed coming from Greece, and El Paso was their first stop. So unfortunately, it didn't allow them to spend time with our students that much, but they got in here about 2 o'clock in the afternoon for a 7:30 concert, and they really knocked it out of the ballpark given the circumstances. This summer then, after they made their concert tour, which included stops in San Antonio and in Houston, they returned to Greece and then made a recording of this project for a record label, the Numa Records, which is then set to be released in February of 2024. So again, this project, again, now is gaining international visibility by the efforts of the Galan Trio. And just a few weeks back, they performed this piece in Tanti, Greece. Again, we have an opportunity to have this piece, and then also Tom Lea's work. Again, obviously they are going to be in their program notes, including information about this. So Tom Lea's impact, again, now is seen in other places, in this case, Greece. So that gives you a general timeline, and here we are a couple weeks later in November of 2023. Now, the work, again, is not too imaginatively titled 3 Sketches on the Artwork of Tom Lea, but since the artwork was so distinguished, I thought the artwork and then the subsequent music would kind of speak for itself, so it wasn't too creative with the title. It is based on the following works by Tom Lea. 2 murals, the first of which is entitled A Franciscan Friar Showing a Book to Indians in the 17th century. Again, another kind of informative title there. It's a mural that you can find at the Brannigan Cultural Center up the road in Las Cruces. I was able to visit there this past weekend to see it live in person for the first time, and it is a truly remarkable work. You just walk into the cultural center, and there it is looking out to you. And again, the craftsmanship of Tom Lea just struck me. Again, how he made it look just so fitting for the location, and the thought that went into it in terms of locating this work and going through all the art craftsmanship to present it. The second work is entitled Comanches, and this is a mural in the post office in Seymour, Texas. Seymour is a town about 3 hours west of Dallas, out on the plains, so it's right in the countries where the Comanches played an important role in the history of Texas in the 19th century. And Tom Lea wanted to commemorate these native peoples with his mural at the post office. The third work, entitled The Altar of the Earth, is an oil painting that's part of a private collection here in El Paso. And thus, these are the three that form the foundation of the work that you'll hear tonight. Now, that raises the question, why pick these works? And I think the simple answer is just my personal reaction to the art. And a lot of times when we see something that's beautiful, we say, why is it beautiful? Because I like it. And that might be kind of the gut reaction. But when we think about something like that, if it's simply, I like it, it raises the question, again, is there something deeper to it than that? Is there something more, again, that has something that will speak to a wider audience that transcends, again, the time and the space? And in reflecting about that, it led me to ask the question, what makes us perceive of something as beautiful? It's a question that artists, that poets, that musicians think about all the time. And there's no simple answer to this, but in thinking about looking at kind of what other people have said about this and hearing discussions of this, it led me to the statements of the philosopher and theologian and Catholic priest, Thomas Aquinas, St. Thomas Aquinas, and what he had to say about beauty. And the way he formulated it seemed to kind of really get at kind of what makes something beautiful and what really struck me as beautiful in Tom Lea's art. Aquinas said there are really three things, again, that really point to something as being beautiful in terms of qualities of what makes those objects, or really whatever it may be, as beautiful. And one is the idea of proportion and balance. The work itself has this sense of not one thing necessarily dominating, but all components of it are proportioned and well balanced. The second issue is the idea of wholeness or integrity. Does the object, again, seem to kind of work together as a whole? Do the component parts kind of add up to more than the whole? And thus that every part that kind of plays its role in contributing to this sense of wholeness. And then the third one, which is a little bit harder to pinpoint, but what Aquinas called radiance, something that kind of exudes a certain light, not necessarily a visual light, but something, again, that speaks to you and that calls you to contemplate it more. When Aquinas defined beauty, he said it is something that pleases when seen. Now, taken at face value, that might kind of return us to, I like it, right? It pleases when seen. But the way it is meant, I think, in the Latin, at least as it has been explained by others, is something that pleases when contemplated, when looked at more than with just a superficial glance, but really an experience where you've taken the time to contemplate what it's all about and where you then perceive all of these qualities. So it's a little bit of a philosophical aside here, but I think it does speak to why I chose these pieces by Tom Lea. Again, I think they all have these components to them, and that's what really helped me to kind of come to a decision on including these works. Now, there's a reference there. If anyone's interested, I'll be happy to send you that specific reference as to where there's a further discussion of these items. On a more practical level, I wanted to also select works that had the potential to group as a set that had a unified and cohesive theme. And in these works, I mean, Tom Lea has painted and he's written about many different topics. He's well known for his work in the war, the Second World War, and depicting some of the horrors and the scenes there. But I chose to focus on his works related to the landscape and history of the American Southwest. And this is a topic that I am very much drawn to. Having come from Minnesota originally, I got to know the land very well from my trips there and back. And what fascinates me is not only the kind of the visual scenes of the Southwest, but also the history and how people who have lived there across the millennia have interacted with this beautiful landscape. I think about the landscape as being God's kind of ever-changing art gallery, and then the people who are there, again, to think about what they had to do to live and survive in a sometimes rather forbidding land has always captured my imagination. And thus I looked at Lee's work that, again, touched upon these themes. And in addition to that, I selected works that had the potential to suggest music that could work together as a compelling and complete work. A multi-movement work, that is a work of several pieces that can be played from beginning to end and that has a reasonable flow to it, a nice sense of pacing. And thus, again, this gives you a little bit of the background. Let's get right to the works and talk a little bit about them, and then we're going to have the featured event where my colleagues and I will perform the compositions. So here's a picture of the first work that served as the inspiration, the mural, the Franciscan Friar. And thinking about the themes between these works, this one focuses on then the people of the Southwest. We have the Franciscan Friar, we have the native peoples, and then we have the Spanish conquistadors there behind. So this scene I chose, again, with its focus on the people of the Southwest. The second work, the Comanches, again, focuses both on people and the natural world and their interaction. So we have, again, the native peoples who are part of central Texas where Lee painted this mural. And then the third work focuses entirely on landscape. So the whole idea is to have this kind of flow from the beginning, people interacting with the land, and then the landscape by itself came to me kind of as a reasonable way to put these works together in a coherent order. And then the music also, how do I set this to music? If you look at a lot of landscape paintings, they tend to be something like this last one here, the Altar of the Earth, something that would inspire kind of a sense of contemplation, reflection, something that would not suggest a very fast tempo. And thus, if you picked all scenes like that, you're probably going to be locked into writing music of a fairly similar style. And thus, if you go back to the Comanches, this piece with the action and the animation, the dust kicking up there, seemed to be an appropriate work that would lend itself well to a faster piece of music. And thus, again, in terms of how they are arranged, this first piece lends itself, again, to a slower, perhaps more contemplative work, faster work to provide musical contrast, and then back to the slower type of feeling, again, to provide an appropriate bookend. So that's a little bit about the background of the work itself. And let's, without further ado, go ahead and perform the work. And before we perform each movement here, I would like to just simply say a few words on some of the things that motivated me from the individual pieces of art here. What struck me about this scene, again, is just the solemn, serious look of the friar there in the middle. And in the beginning of this first piece, you'll hear a melody which is kind of somber, serious, that's played first by the violin alone, and then the other instruments joining in, and that kind of captures kind of the friars in a more serious tone. If you look at the native peoples around, after that, you see kind of a mix of reactions. You see some that are curious, some perhaps are a little bit more resistant, some perhaps even aloof. So to me, it's sort of suggested a feeling of animation, kind of different thoughts, different ideas. And in the middle of this piece, you will then hear a section that's a little bit more flowing and animated. And then if you look to the left of the friar, you see the conquistadors, and that to me kind of pointed to some tension in this painting. And if we think about the friar, he's professing his Catholic faith, but then you have the soldiers there who are enforcing it with the sword, which conflicts actually with what the friar is trying to profess. Christ said, you will not, again, achieve fame through the sword. You will not You will not spread the faith through the sword, but sadly, that is part of the history. So that, to me, created a sense of tension, and the middle part and the climactic part, it'll become a little bit fierce. After that, everything will die away. The tune that accompanied the friar at the beginning will return, though this time animated by all that has gone on before that, and then coming to a soft conclusion. So we'll begin with the performance of a Franciscan friar showing a book to Indians in the 17th century. Thank you. We continue then with the fast movement, the whirlwind movement, Comanches. And as I mentioned, kind of you see the dust kicking up at the bottom there. That kind of inspired me, kind of the sense of action in this. And you'll hear this intensity in action throughout this entire movement. I love to read about Western history, as I mentioned, and I read this book about the Comanches and the type of life they lived. It's very, very fascinating how they were known as the warriors of the plains, the kings of the plains for a period of time in the 18th and 19th centuries. And just to think about how they moved about with kind of wildness, with confidence, with having a command over the land, being able to escape wherever they wanted to, being able to attack whenever they wanted to. It kind of had this sense of, again, just a wildness, of braveness, and kind of the whole spirit that Tom Lea gets in this picture, I think is what I wanted to convey in this work. Now, as I mentioned, again, there's this interaction between the natives and then the background, the landscapes there. And so in this piece, it's not just kind of all action all the time, and you hear that in the outer parts of the work. And in the inner part, just to give everyone a chance to catch their breath a little bit, the music kind of lightens up a little bit. And what I kind of envision is sort of that broad view there in the back. And you can hear kind of these little kind of runs in both the strings and the piano parts, kind of maybe murmurings. Maybe it's the Comanches kind of quickly, slyly moving off to their next adventure or to their next hiding spot, or perhaps the wind. And that will then provide a little bit of the contrast before kind of the intensity of the kind of opening part returns. So we now continue then with the second movement, Comanches. Thank you again. And then, again, to calm things down a little bit and to conclude, again, the piece and indeed our presentation, our evening here tonight, we'll present to you then the piece that accompanies Tom Lea's oil painting, The Altar of the Earth. And what just strikes me with this painting is just the sense of peace, but not just kind of a sort of a lulled piece, but kind of this almost animated piece that, that I feel in this kind of tranquility with the beautiful colors, the scenery, the landscape there, the colors of the sky there, but also the clouds, how they give you kind of this sense of motion within this framework of tranquility. And one thing that kind of struck me about this in not just the clouds kind of all about, but also the hand that emerges out of the clouds. And as I was talking about it with Holly and with some others, again, Tom Lea thought about this as being the hand of God. And to me, kind of speaks to kind of the idea of divine providence as kind of leading our ways and leading us then to a sense of peace. So we have a chance here to kind of luxuriate in the beauty of God's ever-changing art gallery. And in the piece, what you'll hear is, again, the melody itself is fairly slow, but the background kind of has this sense of kind of quiet energy and animation all throughout, and then leading to a very quiet close at the end. So we'll conclude then with the piece that accompanies Tom Lea's The Altar of the Earth. thank you again so much. I guess no mic. We got the mic back. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much again for all joining us here this evening. One final shout out here, again, someone who just made this possible. Thanks to Mr. Steve Haddad, who kind of at the last minute kind of joined in here from the Department of Music to help with the audio here. He is, as I say, the MVP of the music department. For him to come by here and make it all happen, thank you so much. And again, thank you to all of you for coming here and joining us for this evening. Again, for us to have a chance to share this with you, that's kind of the delight of what we do as professionals. And I'm very, very, very grateful that you could join us here for this evening. Go ahead and then enjoy, again, the repast that Holly talked about, and feel free to mingle. Feel free to ask me any questions that you'd like to. That was, I think, part of the advertisement in the program, that there will be a discussion afterwards, so feel free to bring up anything that comes to your mind, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks again.